Good morning. Hello, everyone. Have a good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning to everyone on this very quiet and peaceful little middle of the week, a Wednesday. And I hope that you guys are having a smooth week ahead. I mean, currently a smooth week. Hopefully, you know. Sometimes you never really know if I don't know what I'm saying, but I used to work office hours and Wednesday usually feels like crap to me because it's like it's neither here nor there. And you really wanted to like get to the weekend as soon as possible so you can just lay in bed and do nothing. um but the best decision I ever made in the past, let's say 4 years, is to go freelance so that I can just sit at home and pretend that I am rich socialite who doesn't need to work, but actually I'm working my ass off. You know what's the best thing that come out of COVID? I mean, I know it sounds terrible, but it's the fact that I cannot travel. I usually just save all my money and then I spend it all on traveling. But now that I couldn't travel for like a good 2 years plus now, I have saved up so much money that I can finally improve the quality of my life. Before that, I just like, you know, I neglect my own quality of life usually just because I want to save money for traveling. But during this past 2 years, definitely changed my mind in the sense of I've learned how to take care of myself in a way. Uh, buy a better keyboard for myself, a mechanical one, so that I can do my work better. Buy a really good mouse so I can play my game better. You know, not skimp on things that can improve the quality of my life. So that's definitely one thing that I learned about in these past 2 years. Like, I wish I could travel. I mean, I can travel now, but I'm also I also have to have. I think I have the fact that COVID makes you stay at home at all times, not being able to go out, also aggravated my social and overall anxiety. Therefore, whenever I go out, I get really, really scared and nervous. I can never be out for more than like a couple of hours. So it starts to make me feel like, do I dare to travel? You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm rambling. Anyway, it's been a good week so far for you, Wine. That's good. That's good. That's good. It's good to know. It's always good to find out that your friends are having a good week or a bad week, because you wouldn't want your friends to feel bad, And if your friends feel bad, just be there for them. I've been learning a lot about myself lately. Enough about me. How about you guys? I know Wine is my chat, Diane is my chat. I don't know who the other three person are. I think one of them is Twisty, probably. But I don't know. Twisty Bear. But anyway, do you like my new glamour and my matchy with my little Gaily kitty? Oh, that's Savory, isn't it? No, that's Flip Desk. I'm so sorry. Good morning, Flip Desk. Thank you for being here again. Oh, good morning, Gatos. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, I like how Flip Desk is always sitting at the same little macaron. And I also like the free company tag. It just like immediately it just goes to my brain as the cute anime wow sound. Uh, my voice I can't go any higher pitch than that. Also, especially in the morning. But I hope you guys are having fun so far this week. It's been an interesting week for me. Oh my god, sure knows how to ramble. How interested are you guys are in this book that we currently are reading? You know what I've decided? I've decided to read more contemporary fiction by Japanese author, by younger Japanese author, and not a dead one who is like super depressing, like Natsume Soseki. I've read 3 books by Soseki so far, and it's all so depressing that I think that we need a little bit of change in pace. I would love to read Kazuo Ishiguro stuff. Maybe I bought 3 new books, so I'm probably gonna. One of them is a pre-order, so I might need to wait for it to arrive. So while it's arriving, I might choose a Kazuo Ishiguro book first, and we'll start from the beginning of Kazuo Ishiguro's career. So yeah. But yeah, I picked 3 books that are very very nice. Kazuo Ishiguro also has a new book that came out not I think last year. Yeah. So I'm thinking whether if I should read that one first. But I read some reviews that it's kind of like similar theme or follow up to Never Let Me Go or something like that. When I read reviews I don't really want to read too far because I get scared of spoilers, right? But I might have to read Never Let Me Go before I read the new book that Kazuo Ishiguro came out with last year called Clara and the Sun. Oh, the book cover is so pretty. Go Google it, Clara and the Sun. It's so good. It's so pretty. 6 viewers. Welcome to my channel, you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me to listen to me read. Today we are reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. He's a playwright he's a playwright at he's a playwright by career, and then they turned this play into a novel. So I can totally see how when you read this novel, you can actually visualize how it looks like on stage on a theater play. Good morning, Exia. I assume you can't make it in game, but it's fine as long as you are here in the channel listening. I'm happy. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'll try my best to enunciate and read properly. I listened back to my reading last Monday, and it was like really bad. I have so much to improve in my pronunciation and reading. By the way, do you like the picture that I posted on Twitter? The little cup that's in the picture is something that I made myself. I went to pottery class and I made it myself. I think I want to kind of like learn how to, you know, I think I want to learn pottery properly. Maybe take up like some courses on it. It's really interesting actually. Anyway, it's 11 past 11. Perfect time to start the reading. Today, once again, we are reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. One sip of tea and we shall start. Chapter 2, Husband and Wife. The cafe has no air conditioning. It opened in 1874, more than 140 years ago. Back then, people still used oil lamps for light. Over the years, the cafe underwent a few small renovations, but its interior today is pretty much unchanged from its original look. When it opened, the decor must have been considered very avant-garde. The commonly accepted date for the appearance of the modern cafe in Japan is around 1888, a whole 14 years later. Coffee was introduced to Japan in the Edo period, around the late 17th century. Initially, it didn't appeal to Japanese taste buds, but and it was certainly not thought of something one drank for enjoyment, which was no wonder, considering it tasted like black bitter water. When electricity was introduced, the cafe switched the oil lamps for electric lights, but installing an air conditioner would have destroyed the charm of the interior. So to this day, the cafe has no air conditioning. But every year, summer comes around. When midday temperature soars to above 30 degrees Celsius, you would expect a shop, even one that is underground, to be sweltering inside. The cafe does have a large bladed ceiling fan, which, being electric, must have been added later. But a ceiling fan like this one doesn't generate a strong breeze and simply serve to make the air circulate. The hottest temperature ever recorded in Japan was 41 degrees Celsius at Ekawasaki in Kochi Prefecture. It is difficult to imagine a ceiling fan being at all used in such heat. But even in the height of summer, this cafe is always pleasantly cool. Who is keeping it cool? Beyond the staff, no one knows, nor will they ever know. It was an afternoon in summer. It was only early in the season, but the temperature outside was as nigh. Thank you for the follow, Kimi Dozzles. Oh my god, you just made me hit 80 followers. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was an afternoon in summer. It was only early in the season, but the temperature outside was as high as on any midsummer day. Inside the cafe, a young woman seated at the counter was busy writing. Next to her was an iced coffee diluted by melting ice. The woman was dressed for summer in a white frilled t-shirt and a tight gray miniskirt and a strappy sandals. She sat with her back straight as her pen raised across the cherry blossom pink letter paper. Standing behind the counter, a slender woman of pale complexion looked on. her eyes filled with a youthful sparkle. It was Kei Tokita, and the contents of the letter had no doubt piqued her curiosity. Occasionally, she would take a sneak peek with a look of childlike fascination on her face. Apart from the woman at the counter who was writing the letter, the other customers in the cafe were the woman in the white dress sitting in that chair, and the man named Fusagi who was sitting at the table seat closest to the entrance. Fusagi once again had a magazine open on the table. The woman writing the letter drew a deep breath. Kay followed by taking a deep breath herself. "Sorry for being here for so long," the woman said, inserting her finished letter in an envelope. "Not at all," Kay said, fleetingly glancing down at her feet. "Do you think you could pass this to my sister?" The woman was grasping the letter-filled envelope with two hands, presenting it to Kay politely. Her name was Kumi Hirai. She was the younger sister of the cafe regular, Yaiko Hirai. "Ah, well, if I know your sister..." Kay thought the better of continuing and bit her lip. Kumi tilted her head slightly and gave Kay an inquisitive look, but Kay simply smiled as if she meant nothing by it. "Okay, I'll pass it to her," she said, looking at the letter Kumi was holding. Kumi hesitated a little. "I know she might not even read it, but if you could," she said, bowing her head low. Kay assumed a correct and polite stance. "Of course I will," she said, acting as if she was being entrusted. Good morning, Sam. Good morning, Jay. Alright, I'll stretch, not sweat. I can't sweat in demand. Oh my god. Thank you for the stretch. It's a... Alright, that's a good stretch. Okay. Kay assumed a correct and polite stance. "Of course I will," she said, acting as if she was being entrusted with something extremely important. She received the letter with both hands and made a courteous bow, while Kumi moved to the cash register. "How much?" Kumi asked, handing Kay the bill. Kay carefully placed the letter on the counter. Then she took the bill and began punching the keys of the cash register. This cafe's cash register had to be the contender for the oldest one still in use. Although it hadn't been in the cafe right from the beginning, its keys were very much like those of a typewriter. And it was introduced to the cafe at the beginning of the Showa period in about 1925. This was a very solidly built cash register designed to prevent theft. Its frame alone weighed about 40 kilograms. It made a noisy clank each time a key was punched. Coffee and toast, curry rice, mixed parfait, clank, 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 clank. Kay rhythmically punched in the amounts of each order. Ice cream soda, pizza, toast. Kumi certainly seemed to have eaten a lot. In fact, not everything fitted on one bill. Kay began punching in the orders for a second bill. Curry pilau, banana float, cutlet curry. Normally, it's not necessary to read out each item, but Kay didn't mind doing it. The sight of her punching in the amounts resembled a child happily immersed in playing with a toy. Then you have the gorgonzola gnocchi and the chicken and periglia cream pasta. I sort of peeked out, didn't I? Said Kumi in a rather loud voice, perhaps a little embarrassed at having everything read out. Please, you don't have to read it all out, was probably what she wanted to say. You certainly did. Of course, it wasn't Kei who said this, it was Fusagi. Having heard the order being read out, he had muttered this softly while he continued to read his magazine. Kei ignored him, but Kumi's ears went a rosy pink. How much? Kumi asked, but Kei had not finished. Let's see. Then there was the mixed sandwich, grilled onigiri, second curry. The iced coffee comes to a total of 10,230 yen. Kei smiled. Her round eyes sparkles, showing nothing but kindness. Okay then, here you go, Kumi said. And she quickly pulled out 2 notes from her purse. Kei took the notes and counted them efficiently. Receiving 11,000 yen, she said, and again she punched the keys of the cash register. Kumi waited with her head hung low. Cha-ching! The cash drawer opened with a jolt, and Kei pulled out the change. That's 770 yen change. Smiling once again with her round eyes sparkling, Kei gave Kumi the change. Kumi bowed her head politely. Thank you. It was delicious. Perhaps because she was embarrassed that all the things she had eaten had been read out loud, Kumi now seemed eager to leave quickly. But just as she was going, Kei called out to stop her. Kumi, she said. Kumi stopped in her tracks and looked back at her. About your sister, Kei said, glanced down at her feet. Is there any message you would like me to give her? She held both hands up in the air as she asked. No, it's okay. I wrote in the letter, Kumi said without hesitation. Yes, I imagine you did. Kei furrowed her brow as if disappointed. Perhaps, touched that Kei showed such concern, Kumi grinned and said, after a moment's thought, perhaps there is one thing you could say. Yes, of course. Kei's expression brightened instantly. Tell her that neither Dad nor Mom is angry anymore. Your father and mother aren't angry anymore, Kei repeated. Yes, please tell her that. Kei's eyes were once again round and sparkling. She nodded twice. Okay, I will, she said happily. Kumi looked around the cafe once more and bowed politely to Kei before she left. Kei went over to the entrance to check that Kumi had gone. Then, with a quick pirouette, she started talking to the vacant counter. Did you have a fight with your parents? Then, from under the supposedly vacant counter, a husky voice answered. They disowned me, Hirai said, emerging from under the counter. But you heard her, right? Heard what? That your father and mother aren't cross anymore. I'll believe that when I see it. After being crouched under the counter for a really long time, Hirai bent over like an old woman. She hobbled out into the room. As always, she had her curlers in. She was dolled up in a leopard print camisole, a tight pink skirt, and a beach sandal. Hirai winced a little. Your sister seems really nice. When you're not in my position, I'm sure she is, yeah. Hirai sat on the counter where Kumi had been sitting. She plucked a cigarette from her leopard print pouch and lit it. A plume of smoke rose into the air. Following it with her eyes, Hirai's face showed a rare vulnerability. She looked as if her thought had drifted somewhere far away. Kay walked around Hirai to take a position behind the counter. Do you want to talk about it? She asked. Hirai blew another plume of smoke. She resents me. What do you mean she resents you? Kay asked. She didn't want it to be passed down to her. Huh? Kay tilted her head sideways, unsure what Hirai was talking about. The inn. The inn Hirai's family ran was a well-known luxury place in Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture. Her parents had planned for Hirai to take over the inn, but she had a falling out with them 13 years earlier, and it was decided that Kumi would be the successor. Her parents were in good health, but they were getting on in years, and as the future manager, Kumi had already taken over many of the inn's responsibilities. Since Kumi had accepted she would take over, she regularly made the trek to Tokyo to visit Hirai and try and persuade her to come home. I keep telling her I don't want to go home, but she keeps on asking time and time and time again. Hirai bent her fingers of both hands one by one as if she was counting the times. Saying that she was persistent would be an understatement. But you don't have to hide from her. I don't want to see it. See what? Her face. Kay tilted her head inquisitively. I see it written on her face. Because of what I did, she is now going to be the owner of an inn that she doesn't even want to run. She wants me to come home so that she can be free, Hirai said. I don't really see how all that can be written on her face, Kay suggested doubtfully. Hirai knew Kay well enough to know she was probably struggling to picture this. Her very literal mind sometimes missed the point. What I mean, Hirai said, is it just feels like she's pressuring me. Frowning, she blew out another plume of smoke. Kay stood there thoughtfully, tilting her head to the side several times. Oh God! Is that the time? Oh dear! Hirai said dramatically. She quickly stabbed out her cigarette She quickly out her cigarette in the ashtray. I've got a bar to open. She stood up and gingerly stretched from the hip. You sure feel it in your back after 3 hours crouched down like that. Hirai thumped her lower back and headed quickly for the entrance, her beach sandals flip-flopping loudly. Hold on, the letter! Kay picked up the letter Kumi had given her and presented it to Hirai. Throw it away, Hirai said, without even looking, waving it away dismissively with her right hand. You're not gonna read it? I can imagine what it says. It's really tough for me by myself. Please come home. It's okay if you learn the ropes once you are there, that sort of stuff. As she spoke, Hirai put out her dictionary-sized purse from her leopard print pouch. She put the money for the coffee on the counter. See you later, she said and left the cafe, clearly desperate to get away. I can't just throw it away. Kay's face showed her dilemma as she looked at the letter from Kumi. 1 second. For tea. While Kay was still standing frozen like this, the bell rang again and Kazu Dokita entered the cafe, taking the place of Hirai. Kazu had gone out today with Nagare, the cafe's owner, and her cousin, to buy supplies. She returned carrying several shopping bags in both hands. The car key was jangling with other keys on the key ring hanging off her ring finger. She was dressed casually. Sorry. To position my microphone properly. The car key was jangling with other keys on the key ring hanging off her ring finger. She was dressed casually, wearing a t-shirt and blue jeans. This was in stark contrast to the bow tie and the apron she wore when working. "Welcome back," smiled Kay, still holding the letter. "Sorry we took so long." "No, it was fine. It was pretty quiet." "I'll get changed right away." Kazu's face was always more expressive before she put on her bow tie. She stuck out her tongue cheekily and darted into the back room. Kay kept holding the letter. "Where's that damn husband of mine?" she called out to the back room, looking at the entrance. Kazu and Nagare did the shopping together. This wasn't because there wasn't so much to buy, but because Nagare was a difficult shopper. He would get so caught up with wanting to buy the best that he would often go over budget. It was Kazu's job to tag along and make sure that he didn't. While they were gone, Kei handled the cafe alone. Sometimes when Nagare was unable to find the ingredients he wanted, he would get in a stink and go out drinking. He said he would probably be late coming back, Kazu said. "Oh, I bet he's gone out drinking again." Kazu poked her head out. "I'll take over now," she said apologetically. Don't believe that man," Kay said, puffing out her cheeks. She retreated to the back room, still holding on to the letter. The only people left in the cafe were the woman in the dress quietly reading her novel and Fusagi. Despite it being in the summer, they were both drinking hot coffee. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, you receive free refills with hot coffee. And secondly, the coffee being hot didn't bother these two customers, as it was always cool inside the cafe. And they sat there for so long anyway. Kazu soon reappeared, dressed in her normal waitress uniform. Summer had only just begun, but today it was over 30 degrees Celsius outside. She had walked less than 100 meters from the car park, but the sweat still beaded on her face. She exhaled sharply while wiping her brow with a handkerchief. Excuse me," said Fusagi, who lifted his head from his magazine. "Yes," said Kazu, as if something had surprised her. "May I have a refill, please?" "Oh, sure." She let out her usual cool demeanor slip and replied in the casual tone she had used while wearing a t-shirt just earlier. Fusagi had his eyes glued on Kazu as she walked into the kitchen. When he came back to the cafe, Fusagi always sat in the same chair. If another customer was sitting there, he would leave rather than to sit anywhere else. Rather than coming every day, he normally made an appearance 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes after lunch. He would open up his travel magazine and look through it from cover to cover, while occasionally jotting down notes. He would usually stay as long as it took to finish the magazine. The only thing he ever ordered was a hot coffee. The coffee served at the cafe was made from mocha beans grown in Ethiopia, which have a distinct aroma, but it didn't appeal to everyone's taste. Though it was deliciously aromatic, some found its bitter fruitiness and complex overtones a little overbearing. On Nagare's insistence, the cafe only served mocha. Fusagi happened to like this coffee, and he seemed to find the cafe a comfortable space to leisurely read his magazine. Kazu returned from the kitchen holding the glass carafe to pour Fusagi his refill. Standing by his table, Kazu picked up the cup by the saucer. Fusagi would normally continue to read his magazine while waiting for her to pour his refill, but today was different. He looked directly at her with a strange expression. Sensing that his manner was different from usual, she thought he must want something else beside the coffee refill. Is there anything else? She asked with a smile. He smiled at her politely, looking a little embarrassed. Are you a new waitress here? He asked. Her expression didn't change as she placed a cup in front of Fusagi. Uh, hmm, was all that she replied. Oh, really? She replied a little bashfully. He seemed pleased to have communicated to the waitress that he was a regular customer, but satisfied with that, he immediately lowered his head and returned to reading his magazine. Kazu went out about her work with a deadpan expression as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But with no other customers, there was not much to do. Her only work at the moment was wiping some wash glasses and plates with a tea towel and returning them to the shelf. As she went about this task, she started talking to Fusagi. In this small, intimate cafe, it was quite easy to hold a conversation from such a distance without raising one's voice. So, do you come here often? He lifted his head. Yes, she went on. Do you know about this place? Have you heard its urban legend? Yes, I know all about it. And about that seat as well? Yes. So, are you one of the customers planning on going back in time? Yes, I am, he replied without hesitation. She let her hands pause briefly. If you return to the past, what are you planning to do? But realizing the question was too intrusive and not something she would normally ask, she immediately backtracked. That was a rude thing to ask, I'm sorry. She bowed her head and returned to wiping, avoiding his gaze. He looked at her with her head bowed and quietly picked up his zip portfolio. From it, he pulled out a plain brown envelope. Its four corners were crumpled as though he had been carrying it around for a long time. There was no address on the envelope, but it looked like a letter. He held this letter tentatively in both hands, holding it up a little in front of his chest for her to see. What's that? She asked, pausing once again in what she was doing. For my wife, he muttered in a quiet voice. It's for my wife. Is that a letter? Yeah. For your wife? Yeah. I never managed to give it to her. So, you want to return to the day you meant to pass it to her? Yeah, that's right, he answered, once again without any hesitation. So, where is your wife now? She asked. Rather than answering straight away, he paused in awkward silence. She stood looking squarely at him, waiting for him to answer. I don't know, he said in a barely discernible voice as he began to scratch his head. After this admission, his expression hardened. She said nothing in reply. Then, as if offering an excuse, he said, But I really had a wife, and then hastily added, Her name was... He began tapping his head with his finger. That's odd. He tilted his head. What was her name? He said, and went quiet again. At some time during this, Kay had returned from the back room. Her face looked drained, maybe because she had just witnessed Kazu and Fusagi's exchange. Well, that's odd. I'm sorry, Fusagi said, forcing an awkward smile. Kazu's face showed a subtle mix of emotions. It wasn't quite her normal cool expression, but nor was she showing much empathy. Don't worry about it, she said. Kazu silently looked at the entrance. Ah! She gasped as she saw Kotake standing in the doorway. Kotake worked as a nurse at a local hospital. She must have been on her way home. Instead of her nurse uniform, she was wearing an olive green tunic and navy blue capri pants. She had a black shoulder bag on one shoulder and was wiping the sweat from her brow with a lilac handkerchief. Kotake casually acknowledged Kei and Kazu, standing behind the counter before walking up to Fusagi's table. "Hello, Fusagi. I see that you are here again," she said. Hearing his name, he looked up at Kotake in puzzlement, before averting his eyes and lowering his head in silence. Kotake sensed that his mood was different from usual. She supposed he might not be feeling very well. "Fusagi, are you okay?" she asked gently. Fusagi lifted his head and looked directly at her. "I'm sorry, have we met before?" he asked apologetically. Kotake lost her smile, and in cold silence, the lilac handkerchief she had just used to wipe her brow dropped from her hand onto the floor. Fusagi had early onset Alzheimer's disease and was losing his memory. The disease causes rapid depletion of the brain's neural cells. The brain pathologically atrophies, causing loss of intelligence and changes to the personality. One of the striking symptoms of early onset Alzheimer's is how the deteriorating of brain function appears so sporadic. Sufferers forget some things but remember other things. In Fusagi's case, his memories were gradually disappearing, starting from the most recent. Meaning, his previously hard to please personality had been slowing, mellowing. In the moment, Fusagi remembered that he had a wife, but he didn't remember that Kotake, standing before him, was his wife. "I guess not," Kotake said quietly as she took one, then 2 steps back. Kazu stared at Kotake, while Kei pointed her pale face down at the floor. Kotake slowly turned around and walked to the seat at the counter that was furthest from Fusagi and sat down. It was after sitting down she noticed a handkerchief that had dropped from her hand. She decided to ignore it and pretend it wasn't hers. But Fusagi noticed the handkerchief, which had fallen near to his feet, and picked it up. He stared at it in his hands for a while, and then he rose from his chair and walked over the counter where Kotake was sitting. "You'll have to excuse me. Recently I've been forgetting a lot," he said, bowing his head. Kotake didn't look at him. "Okay," she said. She took the handkerchief in her trembling hand. Fusagi bowed his head again and shuffled awkwardly back to his seat. He sat down but couldn't relax. After turning several pages of his magazine, he paused and scratched his head. Then, a few moments later, he reached for his coffee and took one sip. The cup had only just been refilled, but "Damn, coffee's cold," he muttered. "Another refill?" Kazu asked. But he stood up in a hurry. "I'll be leaving now," he said abruptly, closing his magazine and putting away his things. Kotake continued to stare at the floor with her hands on her lap as she clenched the handkerchief tightly. Fusagi moved to the cash register and handed over the bill. "How much?" 380 yen, please," Kazu said, glancing sideways at Kotake. She punched in the amount on the cash register keys. 380 yen. Fusagi pulled out a 1,000 yen note from his well-worn leather wallet. "Right, here's 1,000, he said as he handed the note over. Receiving 1,000 yen, Kazu said, taking the money and punching the cash register keys. Fusagi kept glancing at Kotake, but with no apparent purpose. He appeared to be just restlessly looking around while waiting for the change. "That's 620 yen change." Fusagi quickly reached out his hand and took the change. "Thanks for the coffee," he said, almost apologetically, and hurried out. "Thank you. Come again." Upon Fusaki's departure, the cafe fell into an uncomfortable silence. The woman in the dress quietly read her book, unbothered as ever with what was going on around her. With no background music playing, the only sound that could be heard were the constant ticking of the clocks and the woman in the dress occasionally turning the page of her book. Kazu first broke this long silence. "Kotake," she said, but she was unable to find the appropriate words. "It's okay. I've been mentally preparing for today." Kotake smiled at Kei and Kazu. "Don't worry." But after speaking, she once again looked down at the floor. She had explained Fusaki's illness to Kei and Kazu before, and Nagere and Hirai knew about it too. She had resigned herself to the fact that one day he would completely forget who she was. She was preparing herself. If it happens, she thought, I will care for him as a nurse. I am a nurse, so I can do that. Early onset Alzheimer's disease progresses differently for each individual, depending on a whole range of factors which include age, gender, and the cause of illness and the treatment. Fusaki's rate of deterioration was progressing rapidly. Kotake was still in shock from his forgetting who she was. She was struggling to get things straight in her head while the general mood was so low. She turned to Kei, but she was in the kitchen. Almost instantly, she appeared holding half a gallon bottle of sake. "A gift from a customer," Kei said as she put it down on the table. "Drink, anyone?" she asked, with the smiling eyes, still red from crying. The name on the label was 7 Happinesses. Kei's spur of the moment decision had introduced a ray of light into the gloomy atmosphere and eased the tension between the three. Kotake was in two minds about drinking, but was reluctant to pass up the chance. "Well, just one," she said. Kotake was simply thankful that the mood had changed. She had heard that Kei often acted on impulse, but she had never expected to experience her sense of fun at a moment like this. Hirai had often mentioned of Kei's talent for living happily. She may have looked despondent a few moments earlier, but now she was looking at Kotake with wide, bright eyes. Kotake found staring into those eyes a strangely calming experience. "I'll see if I can find some other nibbles to go with it," Kazu said, disappearing into the kitchen. "Why don't we warm the sake?" "No, it's okay. Right, we'll drink it as it is." Kei removed the lid deftly and poured the sake into the row of glasses she had set out. Kotake let out a chuckle as Kei placed a glass in front of her. "Thank you," she said with a thin smile. Katsu returned with a tin of pickles. "This was all I could find." She put down a small dish, tipped the pickles onto it, and set 3 small forks on the counter. "Oh, yum," Kei said, "but I can't drink myself." She brought out a carton of orange juice from the fridge under the counter and poured herself a glass. None of these 3 women. "Thank you, wine." A sip of tea. Oh, my cat is so cute. I don't know why I find cat sleeping so cute. I want to live a life without worries like that. Like a cat. Being adopted into a nice house with nice bed. All he does is sleep, eat, poop, sleep, eat, poop, cuddle. He knows I'm talking about him. He just look at me. Ah. None of the 3 women were that particular about sake. especially Kay, who didn't drink. Seven Happinesses earned its name from the claim that who drank it would obtain seven different kinds of happinesses. It was transparent, pigment-free top-shelf sake. The two drinkers did not take much notice of this premium sake's subtle glacial hue, nor its fruity aroma, but it went down well and it delivered on the happy feeling its label promised. As Kotake inhaled the sweet aroma, she recalled one summer day 15 years ago when she first visited the cafe. There had been a heat wave in Japan that year. Record temperatures were continually reported throughout the country. Day after day, the television discussed the unusual weather, often alluding to global warming. Fusaki had taken a day off from work. They had gone shopping together. That day was a real scorcher. Hot and bothered from the heat, Fusaki pleaded that they take refuge somewhere cool. Together they searched for a suitable place like a cafe. The problem was that everyone had the same idea. None of the cafes or family restaurants they spotted had empty seats. Nice to meet you, Ganik's Thunder Song. Thank you so much for attending the reading session. By chance, they saw a small sign in a narrow back alley. The cafe's name was Funikuri Funikura. It was the same name as the song Kotake once knew. It was a long time since she had heard it, but she still remembered the melody clearly. The lyrics were about climbing a volcano. She thought of red hot lava on this hot summer day made everything seem even hotter, and jewel-like beads formed on Kotake's eyebrows. However, when they opened the heavy wooden door and entered, the cafe was refreshingly cool. The clang dong of the bell was so comforting. And even though it had 3 two-seater tables and 3-seater counter, the only customer there was a woman in a white dress seated furthest from the entrance. Thanks to a stroke of luck, they had made a real find. What a relief! Fusagi said and chose the table closest to the entrance. He quickly offered iced coffee from the woman with the bright eyes who brought them glasses of cold water. Iced coffee for me too, please, Kotake said, sitting opposite him. Fusagi must have felt uncomfortable with this seating arrangement as he moved and sat at the counter. This didn't upset Kotake. He is used to such behavior from him. She was just thinking about how wonderful it was to find such a relaxing cafe so close to the hospital where she worked. The thick pillars and the massive wooden beam that cut across the ceiling were a lustrous dark brown, like the color of chestnuts. Mounted on the wall were 3 large wall clocks. Kotake didn't know much about antiques, but she could tell that these were from an earlier period. The walls were tan, made of earthen plaster with a wonderful patina obscure stain that had obviously built over many years. It was daytime outside, but in this windowless cafe, there was no sense of time. Dim lighting gave the cafe a sepia hue. All this created a comforting retro atmosphere. It had been incredibly cool in the cafe, but there was no sign of an air conditioner. A wooden bladed fan fixed to the ceiling was slowly rotating. But that was all. Thinking how strange it was that this cafe was so cool, Kotake asked both Kei and Nagare about it. Neither provided satisfactory answers. They just said, it's been like this since long ago. Kotake took a real shine to the atmosphere and to the personalities of Kei and the others, and so she began to come often during her breaks from work. Kazu was going to say cheers, but stopped herself, screwing up her face as if she had committed a faux pas. I guess it's not a celebration, is it? Oh, come on. Let's not be too down, Kei said gloomily. She turned to Kotake and smiled sympathetically. Kotake held up her glass in front of Kazu's. I'm sorry. No, it's fine. Kotake smiled reassuringly, clinked her glasses with her. The harmonious clink, unexpected and cheerful, sounded throughout the room. Kotake took a sip of the 7 happinesses. Its gentle sweetness spread through her mouth. It's been half a year since he started calling me by my maiden name, she began, speaking softly. It's silently progressing, fading away, slowly but steadily fading away. His memory of me, that is, she laughed softly. I've been mentally preparing for this, she said. As Kay listened, her eyes were again slowly reddening. But it's really okay, honestly, Kotake hastened to add, waving her hand reassuringly. Hey guys, I'm a nurse. Look, even if my identity is totally erased from his memory, I'll be a part of his life as a nurse. I'll still be there for him. Kotake put on her most confident voice to reassure Kei and Kazu. She meant what she said. She was putting on a brave face, but her bravery was real. I can still be there for him because I am a nurse. Kazu was playing with her glass, staring at it with a deadpan expression. Kei's eyes welled up again and a single teardrop fell. Flap. The sound came from behind Kotake. The woman in the dress had closed her book. Kotake turned around to see the woman in the dress placing the closed novel on the table. She took a handkerchief from her white purse and rose from the table and headed towards the toilet. The woman in the white dress walked silently. Had they not heard the novel close, they might never even have noticed that she had gone. Kotake's eyes stayed glued to her movements, but Kei just glanced at her, and Kazu took a sip of 7 happinesses and didn't even look up. After all, it was just an ordinary daily occurrence for them. That reminds me, I wonder why Fusagi wants to return to the past, Kotake said, staring at the seat vacated by the woman in the dress. She knew, of course, that that was the seat for returning to the past. Before the Alzheimer's disease took hold, Fusaki was not the type of person who believed in such tales. When Kotake casually mentioned the rumor that this cafe could send you back to the past, he would scoff. He didn't believe in ghosts or the paranormal. But after he started to lose his memory, the once skeptical Fusagi started coming to the cafe and waiting for the woman in the dress to leave her seat. When Kotake first heard of this, she found it hard to believe. But the personality change is one of the symptoms of Alzheimer's, and now that the disease had progressed, Fusagi had newly become very absent-minded. In light of such changes, Kotake had decided that it wasn't particularly strange that he had changed what he believed in. But why did he want to return to the past? Kotake was very curious about this. She has asked him on several occasions, but he just said it's a secret. Well, apparently he wants to give you a letter, Kazu said as if reading Kotake's mind. Give it to me? Uh-huh. A letter? Fusagi said that it's something that he never managed to give you. Kotake was silent. Then she replied matter-of-factly. I see. Uncertainty swept across Kazu's face. Kotake's reaction to this news was unexpectedly cool. Was it impertinent to have mentioned it? But Kotake's response wasn't anything to do with Kazu. The real reason for her curt response was the fact that Fusagi having written her a letter didn't make much sense. After all, he was never good at reading or writing. Fusagi had grown up in a poor, small, derelict town. I'm so sorry, but my cat looks absolutely cute right now. I need to take a picture. I'll be right back. Sorry for the interruption. My cat's just being extremely cute while he's sleeping. I'm obsessed. I'm a crazy cat woman. Let me take a sip of tea. All right. Fusaki had grown up poor in a small derelict town. His family was in the seaweed trade and every member helped out. But helping out affected his schoolwork so badly that he never learned to write anything more than hiragana and 100 or so kanji characters. Oh my god, he's so cute. Sorry! Oh my god, I'm so distracted. He never learned to write anything more than hiragana and a cute. Oh my god. So stupid. I'm sorry, guys. And 100 or so kanji characters, roughly what a child normally learns in first years of elementary school. Kotake and Fusagi were introduced to each other via a mutual acquaintance. Kotake was 21, while Fusagi was 26. This was before everyone had mobile phones, so they communicated by landlines and letters. Fusagi wanted to be a landscape gardener and live wherever he worked. Kotake had started nursing school, which further reduced their opportunities to meet. They did communicate though, by letter. Kotake wrote all kinds of things in her letters. She would write about herself, of course. Oh, someone is here. Zoe May, thank you for attending the reading events. Thank you so much. She wrote about what went on at the nursing school, of good books she had read, and dreams of the future. She wrote of events which ranged from the mundane to the major news of the day, explaining in details her feelings and reactions. Sometimes the letters were as long as 10 pages. Fusagi's replies, on the other hand, were always short, and there were even times when he would send one-line replies like, "Thanks for the interesting letter," or "I know just what you mean." At first, Kotake thought he must be busy with work and didn't have time to reply, but in letter after letter, Fusagi continued to give these brief replies. She took this to mean that he wasn't very interested in her. Kotake wrote in her letter that if he wasn't interested, then he shouldn't bother replying. That, with this letter, she would stop writing if she didn't get a reply. Fusagi normally replied within a week, but not this time. There was still nothing after a month. This was a shock to Kotake. Certainly, his replies were short, but they never sounded negative, like they had been written out in obligation. On the contrary, they always seemed frank and genuine, so she wouldn't give it up quite yet. In fact, she was still waiting 2.5 months after she had sent the ultimatum. Then one day, after 2 months, the letter arrived from Fusagi. All it said was, "Let's get married." Those few words managed to move her in a way that she has never felt before. But Kotake found it hard to reply properly to such a letter. Fusagi, Having opened his heart in such a way, in the end, she simply wrote, "Yes, let's." It wasn't until later that she learned that he could barely read or write. When she found out, she asked him how he managed to read all the long letters she wrote to him. Apparently, he just allowed his eyes to wander over them. Then he just wrote in reply the vague impression he got from this gazing. But with the last letter, after casting his eyes over and over, he was overcome with the feeling that he had missed something very important. He read it word by word while asking different people to tell him what the words meant, hence the long time it took to reply. Kotake still looked like she couldn't believe it. "It was a brown envelope about this size," said Kazu, drawing in the air with her fingers. "A brown envelope?" Using a brown envelope for a letter sounds like something Fusagi would do, but it still didn't make any sense to Kotake. "A love letter, perhaps?" suggested Kei, her eyes sparkling innocently. Kotake smiled wryly. "No, not a chance," she said, dismissing the idea with a wave of her hands. "But if it was a love letter, what would you do?" Kazu asked with an awkward smile. She didn't normally pry into people's private life, but perhaps she was running with the idea that it was a love letter to help get rid of the dark mood that had until then hung in the air. Also eager to change the subject, Kotake willingly accepted that the love letter theory proposed by those who were unaware of how awful Fusagi was at reading and writing. "I suppose I would want to read it," she replied with a grin. That was no lie. If he had written her a love letter, of course she wanted to read it. "Why not go back and see?" Kei said. "What?" Kotake looked at Kei, her face blank with incomprehension. Kazu responded to Kei's crazy idea by hurriedly placing a glass on the counter. "Sis, seriously," she said, bringing her face close to Kei's. "She should read it," Kei said assertively. "Kei, my love, hold on," Kotake said, trying hard to slow her down. But it was already too late. Kei was breathing heavily and was not interested in Kotake's effort to restrain her. "If it's a love letter that Fusagi wrote to you, you need to receive it." Kei was convinced that it was a love letter, as long as she had this in her mind, she wouldn't be stopped. Kotake had known her long enough to realize that. Kazu didn't look like she was particularly comfortable with where it is going, but she just sighed and smiled. Kotake once again looked at the seat vacated by the woman in the dress. She had heard the rumor about returning to the past. She also knew about the various frustrating rules, and never, not once, had she ever contemplated going back in time herself. She was even uncertain as to whether the rumor was true. But if say it was true, she was not definitely interested in trying. She wanted, more than anything, to know what the letter contained. If what Kazu said was right, if she was able to return to the day that Fusagi had planned to give it to her, she saw a glimmer of hope that she might still get to read it. She had, however, a dilemma. Now that she knew Fusagi wanted to go back in time to give her the letter, was it right to go back to the past to receive it? She was in two minds. It seems wrong to get hold of the letter that way. She took a deep breath and took stock of the current situation calmly. She remembered the rule that going back in time would not change the present no matter how much she tried. That meant that even if she returned to the past and read that letter, nothing would change. "It won't change," Kazu said bluntly when Kotake asked to double check. Kotake felt something large stirring in her heart. So no change to the present meant even if she went back and took it, Fusagi would in the present still be intending to return to the past to give her the letter. She gulped down her glass of 7 happinesses. It was just the thing to set her resolve. Exhaling deeply, she put the glass down on the counter. That's right. That's right, she muttered to herself. If it's really a love letter written for me, how can it be a problem if I read it? Calling it a love letter dispelled her feelings of guilt. Kay nodded vigorously in agreement and gulped down the orange juice as if to express solidarity with her. Her nostrils flared excitedly. Kazu did not join the other two in downing her drink. She quietly placed the glass on the counter and disappeared into the kitchen. Kotake stood in front of the seat that would transport her. Feeling her blood pumping through her body, she carefully squeezed in between the chair and the table and sat down. The cafe's chairs all looked like antiques, elegantly shaped with crabbiole legs. The seat and back were upholstered with a moss green fabric. Kotake suddenly saw in them in fresh light. She noticed that all the chairs were in excellent condition as if they were brand new. It wasn't just the chairs either. The entire cafe was sparkling clean. If this cafe opened in the beginning of the Meiji period, it must have been operating for more than 100 years. Yet there was not the slightest hint of mustiness. She sighed in admiration. She knew that in order to keep this cafe looking this way, someone must have been spending a lot of time each day cleaning. She looked to her side to see standing there Kazu, who had approached Kotake without noticing her. Standing there quietly, there was something eerie about her. She was carrying a silver tray on which there were a white coffee cup, and instead of a glass carafe normally used to serve customers, a small silver kettle. Kotake's heart skipped a bit when she saw how stunning Kazu looked. Her normal girlish qualities had disappeared. She now wore an expression that was both elegant and intimidatingly somber. You are familiar with the rules, right? Kazu asked in a casual but distant tone. Kotake hurriedly went through the rules in her mind. The first rule, that when returning to the past, the only people one could meet were those who had visited the cafe. That's no problem for me, Kotake thought. Fusagi has visited here countless of times. The second rule was that the present won't change by returning to the past no matter how hard one tried. Kotake had already reassured herself that this rule was not a problem. Of course, this did not only apply to the letters. If, for example, a revolutionary treatment for Alzheimer's disease was discovered and somehow taken back to the past to be tried on Fusagi, it would be unable to improve his condition. It seemed an unkind rule. The third rule was that in order to return to the past, one had to sit at this seat in particular. By chance, the woman in the dress had gone to the toilet at just that moment. The narrow window of opportunity was perfectly timed for Kotake to take advantage of. She had also heard, though didn't know it was true, that if you tried to forcefully remove the woman in the dress from her seat, she would curse you. So, coincidence or not, Kotake felt lucky indeed. But the rules did not end there. The fourth rule was that when one returned to the past, it was not possible to move from the chair in which one was seated. It wasn't that you were stuck to the chair, but rather if you did get up, you would be forcefully brought to the present. As this cafe was in a basement, there was no mobile signal. Hence, there was no chance of going back and calling someone who wasn't there. Also, there was not being able to leave your seat meant you couldn't go outside. Yet another detestable rule. Kotake had heard that several years ago that the cafe had become quite famous. Unorthodox. Good morning. Attracting a throng of customers who all wanted to return to the past. With all these maddening rules, no wonder people stopped coming, she thought. Kotake suddenly realized that Kazu was silently waiting for her reply. I have to drink the coffee before it gets cold, right? Yes. Is there anything else? There was one other thing she wanted to know. How could she make sure that she returned to the right day and time? You need to form a strong image of the day you want to return to, Kazu added, as if reading her mind. Simply being asked to form an image was rather vague. An image? Kotake asked. A day before Fusagi forgot you. A day when he was thinking of passing you the letter, and a day when he brought the letter with him to the cafe. A day when he still remembered her. It was a rough guess, but she remembered a day in the summer 3 years ago. It was a time before Fusagi had shown any symptoms. A day before he meant to hand her the letter. This was difficult. If she hadn't received it, how could she know? Yet it would be meaningless to return to a day before he had written the letter. She decided she should simply visualize an image of Fusagi writing to her. And a day when he brought the letter with him to the cafe, this one was important. Even if she managed to go back in time and meet him, if he didn't have the letter, everything would become pointless. Luckily, she knew that he normally put all his important things in his black zippered portfolio, that he would carry this with him. If it were a love letter, he wouldn't leave it lying around at home. He would definitely be carrying it with him in his zippered portfolio so that she wouldn't happen upon it. She didn't know the day when he meant to give it to her, but there was a bag. There was a way. She formed an image of Fusagi carrying his zippered portfolio with him. Are you ready? Said Kazu in a calm, quiet voice. Just a moment. She took a deep breath. She formed the image one more time. Day he doesn't forget. Letter, day he came, she chanted softly. Okay, enough messing around. I'm ready, she said, staring directly into Kazu's eyes. Kazu gave a small nod. She set the empty coffee cup in front of Kotake and carefully picked up the silver kettle from the tray in her right hand. Her ballerina-like motions were efficient and beautiful. Just remember, Kazu paused, facing Kotake with downcast eyes. Drink the coffee before it goes cold. Those soft words echoed through the silent cafe. Kotake sensed how tense the atmosphere had become. With a serious and ceremonial air, Kazu began pouring coffee into the cup. A thin stream of pitch-black coffee poured from the narrow spout of the silver kettle. Unlike the gurgling sound made by coffee poured from a carafe with a wide mouth, the coffee filled the white coffee cup silently and ever so slowly. Kotake had never seen such a kettle before. It was little smaller than those she had seen at other cafes. Solidly built, it looked very elegant and refined. The coffee is probably special as well, she thought. As such thoughts were passing through her mind, a wisp of steam rose from the now full cup. At that moment, everything around Kotake began to ripple and shimmer. Her entire field of vision suddenly seemed unreal. She recalled the glass of 7 happinesses she recently downed. Perhaps I'm feeling its effects? No, this was definitely different. What she was experiencing was far more alarming. Her body had also begun rippling and shimmering. She had become the steam coming off the coffee. It seemed as if everything around her was unraveling. Kotake closed her eyes, not out of fear but in an attempt to focus. If indeed she was not traveling back in time, she wants to mentally prepare herself. The very first time Kotake noticed a change in Fusagi, it was something that he said. On the day he admitted out loud what had happened, Kotake was preparing dinner while waiting for him to come home. A landscape gardener work does not simply involve pruning branches or raking leaves. He has to consider the balance of the house and the garden. The garden cannot be too colorful, nor can be too plain. The key word is balance. That was what Fusagi had always said. His workday began early but finished at dusk. Unless there was a particular reason not to, Fusagi would come home straight away. So when Kotake didn't have a night shift, she would wait for him and they would eat together. On this occasion, night came, but Fusagi had still not come home. This was an unusual behavior, but Kotake assumed he must have gone out drinking with colleagues. When finally he did come home, it was 2 hours later than usual. Normally, he would come home and always ring the doorbells 3 times, but that night he didn't ring. Instead, Kotake heard the sound of doorknob turning and a voice from outside saying, "It's me." On hearing his voice, she rushed out and opened the door in panic. She thought he must have hurt himself in some way that prevented him from ringing. Thank you so much for the follow, joyboy_1. Thank you so much for the follow. We have 81 now, boys and girls. Hell yeah, we are getting close. We're getting close to 90. Let's do it. But there he was, looking as he always did, dressed simply in his grey gardening smock with his navy breeches. He had taken his tool from his shoulder and, looking a little ashamed of himself, admitted, "I got lost." That had happened around the end of summer 2 years ago. Being a nurse, Kotake had been trained to recognize early symptoms of a whole range of illnesses. This was more than simply forgetting something. She was sure of it. Soon after he began to forget whether or not he had done a task at work, after the illness had progressed a bit further, he would wake up in the middle of the night, say out loud, "I forgot to do something important." When this happened, she wouldn't argue with him. She would focus on calming him and reassuring him that they could check up on it in the morning. She even consulted a doctor behind his back. He was keen to try anything that might slow the advancement of his disease, even if just by a little. But as the days went on, he began to forget more and more. He liked to travel. It wasn't the travel itself that he liked, but the opportunity to visit the gardens in different places. Thank you, Joyboy. 10K? Oh man, that would take like 10,000 years. 10K years. Kotake had always arranged to take her holidays at the same time as him so that they could go together. He would complain and say that she was going for work, but that didn't bother her. While on the trip, his brow seemed permanently furrowed, for she knew that this was how he looked whenever he was doing something he liked. Even as his illness progressed, he didn't stop traveling. But he did start visiting the same destination over and over again. After a while, the illness began to affect her daily lives. He often forgot that he had bought things. More and more often, there would be days when he would ask, "Who bought this?" and then spend out the rest of the day in bad mood. They lived in an apartment they had moved to after getting married. But he began not coming home, and she would frequently get calls from the police. Then, about 6 months ago, he started calling her by her maiden name, Kotake. Finally, the dizzy sensation of rippling and shimmering faded. Kotake opened her eyes. She saw the slowly rotating ceiling fan, her hands and her feet. She was no longer a steam. However, she didn't know whether she had actually gone back in time. The cafe had no windows, and she had actually gone back in, and the lighting was always dim. Unless one looked at a watch, there was no way knowing whether it was day or night. The three solid-looking clocks on the wall always showed completely different times. But something was different. Kazu had vanished. Kei was nowhere to be seen. Kotake tried to calm herself, but she was unable to stop her heart from beating faster and faster. She once again looked around the cafe. "There's no one here," she muttered. The absence of Fusagi, who she had gone back to meet, was a huge disappointment. She looked at the ceiling fan in a daze and considered her plight. It was a shame, but perhaps it's for the best. Actually, in some ways, she was relieved. Of course, she wanted to read the letter, but she couldn't help feeling guilty that she was sneaking a peek, so to speak. Fusagi would surely have been cross to learn that she had come from the future to read what he had written. It wasn't as if anything she did would change the present anyway. It didn't matter if she never read it. If by reading it in his condition would somehow improve, then of course she would. She would give her life for that. But the letter had nothing to do with his condition. It wouldn't change the fact that he had forgotten her either. She coolly and rationally considered her predicament, and just earlier she had the shock of him asking her whether they had met before. It had really upset her. She had known this time would come, but it still caught her off balance and brought her here. She was beginning to feel more composed. If this was the past, then it held nothing of use. I should return to the present. Even if I'm just a stranger to Fusagi, I can be his nurse. I must do what I can. She remembered her heart's resolve and reaffirmed it. "I doubt it's a love letter," she muttered to herself as she reached out for the cup of coffee. Clang dong. Someone had entered the cafe. To enter the cafe, one has to descend stairs from the ground level and go in through a large door about 2 meters high, made out of solid wood. When this door opens, the bell sounds, but the visitor does not immediately appear at the entrance, as a small patch of flooring must be crossed. Once the bell rings, there is a time lag of a few seconds before a visitor takes 1 or 2 steps and enters the cafe. So when the bell rang, Kotake had no idea who was in. Was it Nagare or Kei? She noticed how nervous suspense was making her. Her heart was racing in excitement. It wasn't the kind of thing that she normally did, once in a lifetime experience to be exact. If it was Kei, she would probably ask me why Kazu, on the other hand, would just probably deliver her usual customer service. That would probably be a disappointment. Kotake played out various scenarios in her mind, but the person who appeared was neither Kei or Kazu. Standing in the doorway was Fusagi. "Oh," Kotake said. His sudden appearance had taken her by surprise. It was him she had come back to see, but she hadn't been expecting him to walk into the cafe right then. He was wearing a navy polo shirt and beige knee-length short. It was what he wore often on his days off. It must have been hot outside. He was fanning himself with his black zippered portfolio. She sat unmoving in her chair. He stood at the entrance for a while, staring at her with an odd look. "Hi there," she began. She felt clueless as to how she was going to broach the subject she had come to talk about. He had never stared at her like this, not since they met, let alone since they had been married. It was both flattering and embarrassing. She had formed a hazy image of 3 years ago, but she didn't know how to make sure that was where she was. Maybe she hadn't imagined it right. And if that was the case, what was to say that by some mistake she had got the 3 right, but she returned to 3 days ago, when she began to think she might have been too vague. "Oh, hello. I didn't expect to see you here," he said matter-of-factly. Fusagi sounded like he had before he became ill. He was as he had pictured him. That is to say, he was how he remembered him. I was waiting, but you didn't come. You didn't come home, he added. He looked away from her gaze. He coughed nervously with a furrowed brow, as if uncomfortable with something. So it's really you, she said. Huh? You know who I am? What? He looked at her with bemusement. But of course, she's not joking. She had to make sure. It was obvious that she had returned to the past. But when? Before or after the onset of the Alzheimer's? Just say my name. Are you gonna stop messing with me? He spat out crossly. Though he hasn't answered the question, she smiled with relief. No, it's okay, she said, shaking her head a little. This short exchange told her everything she needed to know. She had definitely gone back. The Fusagi standing before her was the Fusagi from before he had lost his memory. And if the image she pictured had worked, it was the Fusagi of 3 years ago. Kotake smiled as she gave her coffee an unnecessary stir. Fusagi observed Kotake and her peculiar behavior. You are acting a bit strange today, he said, looking around the cafe as if he had just realized no one else was there. Nagare, are you there? He called to the kitchen. With no reply, he went behind the counter, flapping his seta sandals as he walked. He peeked into the back room and no one was there. That's odd. No one's here, he grumbled. He sat down on the counter furthest away from Kotake. He coughed on purpose to get his attention. He looks at her, fed up. What is it? Why are you sitting there? Why not? What's stopping me? Why not come sit here? He rapped on the table to beckon him to sit at the empty seat facing here, but he winced at the idea. No, I'm fine. Oh, come on now. Why not? A mature couple sitting together like that? Nah, Fusagi said, a little crossly. The crevice between his brows deepened. He was dismissive of the idea, but his brows furrowed in that way. It wasn't that he was displeased. On the contrary, it was a sign that he was in a good mood. He knew all too well it was meant to conceal his embarrassment. True, we are a married couple, she agreed, smiling. She was so happy to hear the word couple from his lips. Ah, don't be so sentimental. Now, anything he said brought back waves of nostalgia and happiness. She absent-mindedly sipped her coffee. Uh-oh, she said out loud as she realized how much the coffee had cooled. It suddenly dawned on her how limited her time there was. She had to do what she asked to do before. It went completely cold. Look, there's something I need to ask you. What? What is it? Is there anything you want to hand me? Kotake's heart started racing. Fusagi had written it before the onset of his illness. It may have been a love letter, totally impossible, she was telling herself, but if it were, her wish to read it was now running wild, reassured by the fact that no matter what she did, the present would not change. What? About this by this? She drew the size of the envelope in the air using her fingers, just as Kazu had shown her. Her direct approach provoked the alarm on his face. He glared at her, completely motionless. I've blown it, she thought on seeing his expression. She remembered that something similar had happened soon after they were married. Fusagi had a present ready to give her for her birthday. On the night before, by accident, she saw it among his belongings. Never before having received a present from him, she was overjoyed at the prospect of receiving the first gift. On the day of her birthday, when he had returned home from work, she was so excited that she asked him, "Don't you have something special for me today?" But upon hearing this, she went very quiet. "No, nothing in particular," he said. The next day, she found a present in the bin. It was the lilac handkerchief. She felt she had repeated the same mistake. He hated being told to do something that had meaning to do himself. Now, she feared that even if he was carrying the letter, he would never give it to her, especially if it was a love letter. She regretted her carelessness even more so because time was of the essence. He still looked alarmed. She smiled at him. "I'm so sorry. I don't mean anything. Please forgive it. Forget it," she said in a light-hearted way. Then, to emphasize that it didn't really matter to her either way, she tried to make small talk. "Hey, I just thought, why don't we do sukiyaki tonight?" It was his favorite dish. He seemed to be in a sulky mood, but this usually lifted his spirits. She slowly reached for the cup and felt the temperature of the coffee with her palm. It was still okay. She still had time. She could cherish these precious moments with him. She wanted to forget the letter for the time being. Judging his reaction, he had definitely written her something. If he hadn't, why would he have responded in no uncertain terms? "What on earth are you talking about?" If she allowed the current situation to play out, he would end up throwing the letter away. She decided to change strategy. She would try to alter his mood to prevent a repeat of what happened on her birthday. She looked at him. His face was still serious, but then again, it was always like that. He never wanted her to think that just by hearing sukiyaki, his mood instantly lifted. He wasn't that straightforward. That was Fusagi before Alzheimer's. Even his sulky face was precious to her. It was a bliss to be with him again now, but she had read the situation wrongly. "Oh, I get it. I see what's happening," she said. He said with a gloomy look. He got up from the counter and walked over to stand in front of her. "What do you mean?" she asked, looking up at him. He was striking an imposing stance as he glared back at her. "What's wrong?" She hadn't seen him like this before. "You are from the future, aren't you?" What? What he had just said could be considered crazy. But he was right. She had come from the future. Now, look." She was racking her brains trying to remember whether there was a rule that said when you go back in time you cannot reveal that you are from the future, but none existed. "Look, I can explain. I thought it was strange that you were sitting in that seat." "Yes, well, so that means you know about my illness." She felt her heart start racing again. She thought she had been transported back to a time before his disease, but she was wrong. The Fusagi standing before her knew he was ill. Just from looking at his clothes, she could tell it was summertime. She had been transported back to the summer of 2 years ago, the time when he began losing his way, when she began noticing the telltale signs of his illness. If she had gone back by just a year, her conversation with him would have become muddled now. Rather than 3 years ago, she had returned to the day that met the criteria she had imagined, a day when Fusagi had not forgotten her, a day when he was thinking of passing her the letter, and a day when he brought it with him to the cafe. To have gone back 3 years would have meant that he had not returned the letter. The Fusagi standing before her knew he was ill, so it was likely that the content of the letter concerned his disease. Also, the way he reacted with such dread when she mentioned the letter seems further evidence. "You know, don't you?" he said forcefully, pressing her to give an answer. She couldn't see how she could lie at this stage. She nodded silently. "I see," he muttered. She regained composure. "Okay, whatever I do here is not going to change the present, but it might upset him. I never would have returned to the past if I thought that might happen. How embarrassing I was, caught up in the idea of being a love letter." She felt deep, deep regret for coming back, but now was not the time to be wallowing. He had gone silent. "My love?" she called out to the despondent-looking Fusagi. She had never seen him looking so depressed. It was heart-wrenching. He suddenly turned his back on her and walked towards the counter where he had been sitting. He picked up the black portfolio. From it, he pulled a brown envelope and walked towards her. His face showed no signs of wretched or desperation. He looked more embarrassed than anything else. He began to mumble, in a throaty voice that was difficult to hear. The you living in this time doesn't know about my illness. He might be under the impression, but I already know or will very soon. I just don't know how to tell you. He held up the envelope to show her. It was plain to tell that he has Alzheimer's in this letter. But I don't need to read it. I already know. It would make more sense to give it to me in the past, the me that Fusagi cannot bring himself to give to. I guess if he cannot pass it to the version of me, it's okay that I take it. That's just the way things are. She decided to leave while things were just as they were at the moment. She didn't want the subject of his illness to be broached. The worst case scenario was him asking about his condition in the present. If he asked how his condition progressed, who knows how he would take the awful news. She should return before she asked. Now was the time to return to the present. The coffee was now at temperature that she could down it at one go. I cannot let the coffee go cold, she said. Brought the cup close to her mouth. So I forget you? He mumbled, looking down. Hearing this, she was overwhelmed by confusion. She didn't even know why there was a coffee cup in front of her. She looked at him in trepidation. Staring at him, she noticed how forlorn his expression was now. She had never imagined that he could look that way. Lost for words, she couldn't even maintain eye contact and found herself casting her eyes down. By giving no reply, he had answered his question with a yes. I see. I feared as much, he murmured sadly. He bowed his head so deeply that his neck looked like it might break. Her eyes welled with tears. After being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he struggled each day with the dread and anxiety of losing his memory. Yet she, his wife, had not seen how he had borne these thoughts and feelings alone. On learning that he had come from the future, the first thing he had wanted to know was whether he had forgotten her, his wife. This realization filled her with both joy and sorrow. It gave her the strength to look at him in the face without wiping away her tears. She smiled broadly at him so he might interpret her tears of those of joy. Actually, your illness does get better, you know. As a nurse, now it is the time I need to be strong. In fact, you in the future told me I can say anything without changing the present. How you did have anxious moments. What does it hurt if I lie? If I can relieve his anxiety right now, even if it's just for a moment, it's worth it. She wanted so much her lie to be believed. She would do anything. She had a lump in her throat. Tears streamed down her face. But maintaining her beaming smile, she continued, It will be all right. You will recover. Don't worry. Every word she spoke, she delivered with all her strength in her mind. It wasn't a lie. Even if he had forgotten who she was, even if nothing she did changed the present, he looked her straight in the eyes and looked right back at him, her face streaming with tears. He looked happy. Oh, really? He said in a soft whisper. Yes, she said. He looked at her in the gentlest of ways, looking down at the brown envelope he was holding in his hands. He slowly approached her. The distance between them was now such a letter might be handed from one to another. Here, he said, like a shy child, he offered her the brown envelope he was holding. She tried to push the letter away. "But you get better," she said. "Then you can throw it out," he said, handing her the letter more forcefully. His tone was different from his normal gruff self. He spoke with such gentleness that it gave her the odd feeling that she must have missed something. He once again pressed the envelope on her. Her trembling hands reached out and nervously took it. She wasn't sure of his intention. "Drink up, your coffee will go cold," he said, acknowledging the rules. The kindness in his smile seemed infinite. She nodded. It was just a small nod. With no words left, she reached for the coffee. Once she had her hands firmly on the cup, he turned his back. It was as if their time as a couple had reached its end. A large tear to form in her eye. "My love!" she cried out without thinking. He did not turn round. His shoulders appeared to be trembling ever so slightly. While watching his back, she drank the coffee in one go. She drank it in one gulp, not out of a sense of urgency that the coffee was about to go cold, but rather out of respect for Fusagi, whose gentle back was turned to ensure she could quickly and safely return to the present. Such was the depth of his kindness. "My darling," she felt, overcome with a shimmering and rippling sensation. She returned the cup to its saucer. As her hand drew back, it seemed to dissolve into steam. All that was left to do was to return to the present, this fleeting moment when they had once more been together as husband and wife, had ended. Suddenly, he turned around, a reaction, perhaps, to the sound of her cup hitting the saucer. She didn't know how he could make her out, but he seemed to be able to see her there as her consciousness flickered and dissipated into steam. He saw his lips move a little. Unless she was mistaken, he seemed to be saying, "Thank you." Her consciousness had merged with steam, and she had begun to transition from past to present. The cafe around her began to fast forward. She could do nothing to stem the flow of her tears. In a blink, she realized Kazu and Kei had reappeared in her field of vision. She had returned to the present, the day that he had completely forgotten her. One look at her expression was enough to fill Kei's face with worry. "The letter?" she asked. "Letter, not love letter." She dropped her gaze to the brown envelope she had been given by Fusagi in the past. She slowly removed the letter from the envelope. It was all written in basic script, all squiggly like crawling worms. It was definitely Fusagi's handwriting. As Kotake read the letter, she held her right hand to her mouth to stop sobbing as her tears fell. So sudden was her outburst of tears that Kazu was worried. "Kotake, are you okay?" she asked. Kotake's shoulders began to shudder, and gradually she began wailing louder and louder. Kazu and Kei stood there, looking at her, unsure what to do. After a while, she handed Kazu the letter. Kazu took the letter, and as if looking for permission, she looked at Kei behind the counter. Kei nodded slightly with a grave expression. Kazu looked back at the tearful Kotake and then began to read out loud. "You are a nurse, so I can only assume you have already noticed. I have an illness where I forget things. I imagine as I keep on losing my memory, you will be able to put aside your own feeling and care for me with the detachment of a nurse, and that you can do that no matter what strange things I say or do, even if I forget who you are. So I ask you never to forget one thing. You are my wife, and if life becomes too hard for you as my wife, I want you to leave me. You don't have to be my nurse. If I am no good as a husband, then I want you to leave. All I ask is that you can do what you can as my wife. We are husband and wife after all. Even if I lose my memory, I want to be together as husband and wife. I cannot stand the idea of us staying together only out of sympathy. This is something that I cannot say to your face, so I wrote it in a letter. When Kazu finished reading, Kotake and Kei looked up at the ceiling and began to cry loudly. Kotake understood why Fusagi handed this letter to her, his wife from the future. From the letter, it was clear that he had guessed that she would do what she would do after she found out about his illness. And then, when he came from the future, it became clear to him that just as he predicted in the future, she was caring for him like a nurse. Amid the anxiety and fear of losing his memory, he was hoping that she would continue to be his wife. She was always in his heart. There was more proof of this to be found. Even after losing his memories, he would content himself by looking at travel magazines, opening his notebooks, jotting something down. She had once looked at what he wrote. He had been listing the destinations that he had traveled to in order to visit gardens. She had simply assumed his actions were a hangover for his love of his work as a landscape gardener, but she was wrong. The destinations she made a note of were all the places that she had visited with her. She didn't notice at that time. She couldn't see. These notes were the last handhold for Fusagi, who was gradually forgetting who she was. Of course, that she had looked after him as a nurse didn't feel like a mistake to her. She had believed that it was for the best. And he didn't write the letter to blame her in any way either. It seemed to her that he knew that her talk about him getting healed was a lie. But it was a lie he wanted to believe. Otherwise, she thought, he wouldn't have said thank you. After her crying stopped, the woman in the dress returned from the toilet, stood in front of her and spoke just one word. "Move," she said in a low voice. "Sure," she said, leaping up and relinquishing the seat. The woman in the dress reappearance was impeccably timed, coinciding with a switch in Kotake's mood. Eyes swollen from crying, she looked at Kazu and Kei. She held up the letter Kazu had just read and waved it. "So there you have it," she said with a grin. Kei responded by nodding, her right brown eyes still streaming tears like a waterfall. "What have I been doing?" Kotake mumbled, looking at the letter. "Kotake," Kei sniffled, looking worried. Kotake neatly folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. "I'm going home," she said, in a bold, confident voice. Kazu gave a small nod. Kei was still sniffling. Kotake looked at the still teary-eyed Kei, who had cried longer than she had. She smiled as she thought that Kei must be getting pretty dehydrated and let out a deep breath. No longer looking lost, she seemed empowered. She pulled out her purse from her shoulder on the counter and handed Kazu 380 yen in coins. "Thanks," she said. With a calm expression, Kazu returned a smile. Kotake gave a quick nod and walked towards the entrance. She stepped lightly. She was in a hurry to see Fusagi's face. She passed through the doorway and out of sight. "Ah!" she said, doubled back into the cafe. Kazu and Kei looked at her inquiringly. "One more thing," she said. "Starting tomorrow, no more calling me by my maiden name, okay?" She grinned broadly. It was Kotake who originally requested that she be called by her maiden name. When Fusaki had started calling her Kotake, she wanted to avoid confusion, but such consideration was not necessary now. A smile returned to Kei's face, and her bright eyes opened widely. Okay, got you, she said happily. Tell everyone else too, said Kotake, and without waiting for a reply, she waved and left. Okay, said Kazu, as if speaking to herself, and put the money from Kotake in the till. Kei cleaned away the cup that Kotake drank from and went to the kitchen to get the refill for the woman in the dress. The clank sound from the keys of the cash register reverberated through the room. The ceiling fan continued to rotate silently. Kei returned and poured new coffee for the woman in the dress. We appreciate your presence again this summer, she whispered. The woman in the dress continued to read her novel and did not reply. Kei placed her hand on her own stomach and smiled. Summer was just getting started. And that is the end of chapter 2 of Before the Coffee Gets Cold. What do you guys think? Aww. Don't be sad. I think it's it's sad, sure, but in sadness there is hope, in my opinion. I hope you all enjoyed today's reading, and thank you for everyone who had been here in the game with me, watching me read, even though I'm just standing here. How are y'all feeling right now? Chapter 2 is definitely shorter than chapter 1, and I can only assume that chapter 3 and 4 is like really shorter. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I stutter a lot and I keep messing words up. It's terrible. I'll try to do my best to read better next time. And it's like I keep getting interrupted by my stupidly cute cat. It's definitely kind of a different type of book, I think. Like different type of novel in the sense that like the setting is very clearly a play. So it's not like a conventional novel. There's a lot of dialogues and like scene setting. So that's quite interesting to me. I personally really like a lot of scene setting, so that like I can imagine how the place look like and how people would like how the people look, or like in this case we have like a little description about how the characters look like, but the most important thing is that the scene setting of the cafe is actually very, very effective. So in my head, I can already imagine how small and cramped the place is and how old it looks, but at the same time, it sets up a very, very the way it was written. It's very screenplay. It's very playwright. Like it's a very screenplay type of writing. So it's definitely different from a lot of novels that I read, for sure. Yeah. I just thought that it's a good change from depressing shit that I've been reading to you all for the past like month. And but Still a bit sad, but not too depressing. I think. I think the portrayal of the love between the husband and wife is very very strong and effective, in my opinion. That's really good. Oh, Ganix have actually watched the movie, huh? I have no interest in watching the movie. I always think that the books are better. Yeah, I chose I chose this Gaily cat because it matches my outfit. I should have dyed it the same color, but it's the color is too close to my skin tone, so I decided not to. But there were like uh certain places on my gown that have very very similar color to the the outfit of the minion. Yeah, I wish this minion would sit on my shoulder like the normal Gaily cat. I hope y'all had a good time listening to me today. Um, if y'all wanna claim anything from my Banuna points, a love quote, or a tarot card read, or a poem, or anything, please let me know. Please, you can claim me right now. If you think that the Banduna points are too expensive to claim for certain things, do give me feedbacks. If you think that my reading is not good, do give me feedbacks. If you think I read too fast, let me know. If you think that I read too slow, let me know. Um, and yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. As always, I really appreciate it and very thankful for having all of you here listening to me read. Um, like I said, I never intended to do this for fame and anything. Oh wow! Oh my god! Thank you, Ganiyani, for the follow. Thank you so much. Oh my god. Oh my god. Thank you so much for the follow. You guys are the best. Seriously. Aw. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the support, for coming here into this location. Dien and Coco put in a lot of effort in decorating the place. I'm not very good at like house decoration. Thank you, Ando. Thank you so much. Thank you for always supporting me. Thank you for always watching my stream even when I'm not doing reading session. Thank you for Flip Desk. Thank you so much. I've seen you a lot of times already. Thank you for Ganix. Ganix, thank you, thank you, thank you. Zoe May, thank you, thank you, thank you. Kiani, thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, thank you, Deanne, the best manager one could ever have. Alrighty, if there's no claims of Banuna Points redemption, I am gonna end the stream right here. And the next chapter 3, we will continue it on this coming Friday, same time, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. GMT plus 8. Just drop by and continue listening to this story. We have two chapters to go. So I'll be reading it on this coming Friday. And if the chapter is very very short for the chapter 3, I'll just continue and just finish up the entire book on this Friday. And then next week we'll start a new book. Is that okay with you guys? Also, thank you, Kiana Reese, for the follow. Oh my god, thank you so much. Oh, I have to change my followers goal now to 100. Oh my god. Thank you so much, you guys. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before I go, everyone, let's vibe with me on this amazing Wednesday afternoon.
Have you ever had a dream that you could don't do skid you don't do skid you want don't do skid.
Hell yeah! Thank you once again for watching and listening. I'll come back. I'll be continue the story on this coming Friday morning. See you then. Bye.